Hello and welcome to Charch Chat. I'm Paul Charchian from LeagueSafe.com. Thanks for joining us here at Open Sports. Recap of some of the action from Week 12, and there's a lot of stuff to get to. As always, these always end up being my longest videos each week, and I really appreciate everybody who sticks through to the bitter end as we go through some of the eye-popping developments from Week 12, beginning with a number of the injuries from around the league of fantasy importance. Beginning with Mark Bulger, he ended up leaving with a concussion. Trent Green came in and looked awful, which was too bad because there was an opportunity here against a very suspect Bears secondary that lost Nathan Vasher, but that goes down the drain, and the Rams ended up being as bad as we had all feared. Brady Quinn, the finger wasn't right. He didn't look good. They brought in Derek Anderson. He looked terrible too. Kevin Smith ended up leaving the game early. Mark Bradley left his game early. Amon Green suffered a knee injury that looks like it could keep him out at least a couple of weeks, maybe more. And that's good news for Steve Slayton, who had lost all his carries to Amon Green at the goal line in the past. Maybe Slayton will get those back. Greg Camarillo suffered what could be a potentially serious knee injury. The fill-in that got use, and I'm not going to lie to you, I hardly knew who this guy was. Devon Bess is his name. Ended up getting some extra receptions, and if it turns out that Camarillo's injury is serious, Devon Bess might be somebody you're looking at picking up. Carl Buckhalter ended up leaving the game, and that meant that a very gimpy Brian Westbrook had to finish it out. Julius Jones left the game early, so Maurice Morris got a lot of action. He had a calf injury, and Plaxico Burress tried to play with the hamstring but couldn't do it and ended up leaving very shortly towards the beginning of the game. All right, some of the news from around the league going back to Week 12. Adrian Peterson benched for the first two series of the game, which is really disappointing because if you were to put in Chester Taylor's numbers onto his game, it would have been a really nice game. And he still had a good game, Adrian Peterson did, but still very frustratingly, Brad Childress choosing not to use Adrian Peterson, in my mind, nearly as much as they should. And Peterson's an awfully good player and frankly deserves more use than what he's getting here. He sat out the first two series because he was late for a team meeting, and I guess the rules apply to everybody. Michael Turner, 4 touchdowns. Unbelievable. He now leads the league in touchdowns, and increasingly, it looks like Michael Turner's going to be your number one running back next year. Right now, I'm not sure that even Adrian Peterson, or LaDainian Tomlinson, or any of the other usual suspects are going to be there. There's no quarterback that's going to be there because nobody's having a Brady-like season. There's no wide receiver that's going to be there, I don't believe. So it just increasingly looks like Michael Turner is going to be your number one running back next year, and he's really good. All right, Terrell Owens, 200-yard game, and not his first, by the way. He had actually posted a bigger game than this one other time over the course of his career. He had, coming into this game, 5 straight games with less than 40 yards, but the matchup screams start, and Tony Romo back and looking really good after looking rusty last week, and so it's all systems go there. Roy Williams, kind of an afterthought this week, but don't be surprised if teams really, after this big performance, they knuckle down and they really double up Terrell Owens, especially with Jason Witten, who hasn't been right for the better part of a month here, and that may free up Roy Williams next week. Baltimore's running back by committee. It's always somebody different. This week it was LaRon Landry. It's awfully frustrating. Willis McGahee, he just 8 carries, and he's not looking right. And that's another guy playing hurt. Sometimes you're better off just not playing. Ray Rice also getting into some action and looking a little bit better. And I don't know why they don't give Ray Rice more looks. I think he's the best of the 3, and it's not that close. Another amazing game from Matt Cassel, 400 yards back-to-back. Unbelievable. It's the first time that's happened since Billy Volek did it back in 2004, I believe. And at this point, you got to figure that Cassel's a guy you can start every week, and Randy Moss goes right back to being the elite receiver that he was under Tom Brady. Not that Tom Brady is Matt Cassel, but Randy Moss is elite receiver, again, like he was when he had Tom Brady. Kellen Winslow played but didn't do anything. Very disappointing. It's tough for fantasy owners. You see that he's active, so you start him, and then he does nothing. He did suffer some from bad quarterbacking play, but still only 1 catch. Donovan McNabb was benched, and I'm not worried here in part because Kevin Kolb did nothing. He looked terrible, and so McNabb will almost certainly get the start in a short week to Thanksgiving. Now, if he looks bad after Thanksgiving, who knows? But McNabb, it looks like the confidence is not there right now. That offense is absolutely stalled out. I think he's probably done in Philly at the end of this year, and maybe for the best. Maybe he'll have a lot more success in Minnesota next year. Cadillac Williams, 16 carries, did almost nothing with them, but it was nice to see him back on the field. I think the only real angle here for Caddy is perhaps as a goal line vulture to work. Dunn, Dunn's just looking a lot better than Williams right now and running the ball much stronger. So for the time being, unless we see a lot more out of Williams, who hasn't been a fantasy notable for now 3 years, we'll have to assume that he has very little fantasy value, except perhaps as a goal line guy. Brandon Jacobs was deactivated, and it's a reminder that, and he came in this game probable. Because he was deactivated from probable, it's a reminder of the importance of checking for inactives in an hour before kickoff of those late Sunday games, because it's hard to do. You're enmeshed in everything that's happening in your games. It's the third quarter of all the early games. There's usually 8 or 9 or 10 of those going. So it's hard to remember to go back to those other games and pay close attention to them for those inactives, for those late games. But it is really important. And Brandon, I assure you that Brandon Jacobs going inactive was absolutely missed by a lot of people and surprised a lot of people, myself included, unfortunately. Steve Smith, 168 yards, which is great. The yardage numbers have been there, but we need him to score touchdowns. In the past, I've talked about his propensity of dropping touchdown passes, and he dropped another one this week. And then there was another play where Delhomme had him wide open with fully like a quarter of the end zone. And it was just Steve Smith there, and Delhomme just didn't see him. And it was very frustrating, and could have scored a couple of touchdowns in this game, and Delhomme just, he dropped one, and Delhomme missed him on another. Justin Fargas ended up with a 100-yard game, which is great, but the touchdowns went to McFadden. But if you missed that game, here's what happened. Early in the game, they had a number of situations where they had goal-to-goes, and they kept giving it to Fargas, and he kept getting stopped. And eventually they gave up on Fargas, went to McFadden, who scored on his very first try. And then when they had another opportunity later in the game with a goal-to-go situation, they again gave it to McFadden, and he scored again. So we may be seeing a belief in the Oakland Raiders' part that McFadden is a better goal line back, although he doesn't seem to be physically any bigger than what we're getting out of Justin Fargas. But maybe they like him a little bit better that way. Chris Johnson, the rookie who was at one point making a play for Rookie of the Year status for Tennessee, with another bad game, and he fumbled, and that's 3 straight bad games for him. So there's going to be a temptation on the part of many of you to think about benching Chris Johnson. He's been unbenchable for the first 8 games of the year. But don't panic. The remaining schedule now are the next 3 weeks: Detroit, Cleveland, Houston. Those are all great opportunities for him. Alluded to Brian Westbrook in the Philadelphia offense earlier, but let's just mention 39 rushing yards, -5 receiving yards for Brian Westbrook, and the wheels are just off there. He's not right. He clearly looks like he's not playing very well. He looks awfully hindered by his many injuries: rib, ankle, knee. He needs a week off. The problem is Buckhalter's hurt, so may not get a week off. And until that happens, and there are also the injuries to the offensive line have also been a real contributing factor to the demise of that offense. But until he gets some time off, I don't necessarily trust him. That's 4 straight bad games for Brian Westbrook. Clinton Portis looked great in his game, running really hard. So if you had, he looked really bad 2 weeks ago when he played on Monday Night Football, which was a gutty effort, and I applaud him for it, but he didn't look right. Just let me rest assured, if you didn't see his game, he looked fantastic. Ran the ball with abandon and running really hard. He looks like he's running with the fresh legs of somebody in week 1, not somebody who's getting into the latter part of the season. Very impressive game for him. Trent Edwards finally came to life against a terrible team. We've been waiting for this forever. He'd had this string of lousy opponents. Finally, it all clicked this week. Piled in, what should have been 3 games of stats into 1 game. Nice to see it finally happen. I think he was probably on the bench for a lot of people because you just felt like you couldn't trust him anymore, regardless of opponent, because he had missed so many other good opportunities. The difference here, Kansas City without Patrick Surtain, a couple of guys in the secondary actually out in this one, and that was a big part of the difference here. So I worry about Trent Edwards going forward because he's not going to have these injury-riddled secondaries to play in future weeks. And lastly, Matt Ryan, just another tremendously impressive game for Matt Ryan, who will run away with Rookie of the Year voting. And I'll tell you what, the Falcons' offense is going to be really good for a long time. You got Turner, who's an older player but has very low miles, coming in after just being a backup for all that time, and he's going to be good for another 3, 4, 5 years. And Matt Ryan could be good for a decade. Roddy White it still looks like he's going to be very good. Michael Jenkins is playing well. This is going to be a team that's going to be very good. I will be fascinated to watch to see if Atlanta does what they absolutely ought to do in the offseason, and that is solidify that offensive line. They have all these great skill position guys. Start putting high draft picks on your offensive line to make your offense an elite offense for a long time and protect the investments. Hopefully they will go ahead and do that. Whew, all right, there you go. Thanks for sticking to the bitter end of a very long Charch chat. If you've got any questions for our fantasy department, send an email to fantasy@opensports.com. I'll be back on Tuesday to talk about some of the guys you should pick up off of the free agent waiver wire.
So you think you can tackle a pro? There's only one way to find out. Click on fantasy@opensports.com.